Hello and welcome to another episode of the Total Saints podcast. I'm Martin Starke, and each week I'm joined by our panel of Saints experts to reflect on all things Southampton Football Club. Once again, we're streaming this episode of TSP live tonight. It's on our Twitter and on our Facebook pages, and also on our YouTube channel. So if you're watching live on Facebook or YouTube, you can get involved in the conversation in real time using the comments section. Be sure to post any questions that you have for the panel, and we'll try and get through as many as we can. Now, coming up this week on the pod, reaction to the defeat at Liverpool on Saturday, and we look ahead to two games at home this week, Leicester on Wednesday and then Brighton at the weekend. But first, let me introduce you to our regular guests. SaintsWeb is the #1 independent Southampton FC website. Steve Grant is the brains behind it. He's currently in Dubai. Heading back soon though, Steve, any chance you can bring some sunshine back with you? Because it's a bit chilly here.
I'll see what space I've got in my case. Yeah, coming back overnight UK time, so I'll be landing in the freezing cold at Heathrow at about 11ish tomorrow morning, I think. So yeah, looking forward to three weeks back, fitting in loads of games.
Well, a couple of games to look forward to this week, that's for sure. League One -10 is the weekly Saints blog, which has become a firm favourite with Saints fans around the world. Glen de la Cour is the writer. Have you come to terms with the result yesterday, Glen? Are you all right?
Oh, I'd come to terms with the result after about 3 minutes, to be honest. Oh, yeah, it panned out exactly the way I thought it would. So I've been having a great week. Just on Steve's theme of warmth, my central heating broke down, so that was really good. Chose the coldest week of the year to do that. So Steve, with his like those very small violin stories about how cold he's going to be after spending a month in Dubai or whatever, I'm not having any of it. So yeah, it's not been the most fantastic week, and yes, I've definitely come to terms with the result yesterday.
Good. All right, well, we'll put the whole thing to bed soon. Also with us is the Athletics dedicated Saints reporter. That's Dan Sheldon. How was the north of England yesterday, Dan? Did the weather treat you well?
It was cold, windy. It was mainly windy, to be honest. I went up on Friday and I parked up, opened my door, and I thought my door was going to fly off my car. It was that windy, and there was fire engines outside the hotel because tiles were flying off. Yeah, it was.
That's just Liverpool, to be fair.
Yeah, I went out for a pint. There's a bar a couple of 100 yards down the road, and I was dressed up, and I couldn't fathom how many people were dressed down and how windy and how cold it was. I was like, the north is just somewhere completely different to what I'm used to.
Well, we're glad that you're back safe and sound. Of course, the biggest hello and thank you, as always, is reserved to our patrons, wherever you're listening or watching this week. This is episode 177 now of the Total Saints podcast. So it was another defeat on the road at the weekend, this time at Liverpool. What did you make of the game, Steve?
It was weird. I mean, I think Liverpool were kind of at us as I think everybody would have probably predicted before the game. I don't think there were any huge surprises there. And actually, our system was something that we'd mentioned the week before, that maybe we would play these wing backs to stop the crosses from deep coming in, that Alexander-Arnold has thrown in all season, has been picking up assists galore. And actually, we did stop him doing that. The problem was that we let them run through the channels far too much, and that was kind of where we fell over, unfortunately. I thought we looked quite good in parts when we were going forward, but as ever, complete lack of cutting edge. When we had chances, we fluffed our lines. When they had chances, they pinged it in the corner. That was the long and short of it, and that's why they pay 40 million quid for a player who, when he first signed for them, was basically a backup. He's a bench player, might play the sort of dead rubbers in the Champions League, and now Diogo Jota is, for me, one of their kind of best players at the moment.
Yeah, Glenn, you were starting to fear the worst, weren't you, after that first goal went in yesterday?
Yeah, though to be fair, after the first goal, which again going back to, we said after Norwich that we don't want to throw them anything. We don't want to make it easier for them to score. That first goal was far too easy. There was a couple of players culpable in the build up to that goal. I thought between the first and the second goal, we actually didn't play too badly. We created a couple of openings, forced them into mistakes, pressing them high up. And the second goal was the point where we should have said, okay, this game's dead now. We need to stop chasing them in their half of the pitch and just defend and get to half time at 2-0. Unfortunately, we didn't do that. We carried on. It then went to 3-0. The third goal it perfectly illustrated the sort of the mess that we had tactically, where we ended up with like a flat back five and just two players in midfield because none of the forwards were tracking back, and that allowed Thiago to just sort of stroll onto that ball. He was half chased by one of the forwards, I think, and Romeo and Ward-Prowse had no chance in the centre of midfield trying to play against Thiago, Henderson, Fabinho and Jota when he dropped in there. So, yeah, third goal was horrible. Half-time readjusted, went to 4-2-2, and it was better. But Liverpool phoned it in for the last half an hour. They didn't need to score another goal, and they phoned it in to such an extent that they could bring on their professional substitutes, couldn't they? Oxlade-Chamberlain and Minamino. So the fact that those two came on shows that the game is done, and they phoned it in. So I think overall, probably everyone was happy to get out of there with only getting beat 4-0.
Yeah, Liverpool are a top team with world-class players, of course, but did we make it too easy for them, Dan, in the way we set up yesterday?
I don't think that was the initial plan in terms of how easy they were going to score and kind of bypass play. I don't think Ralph thought, well, if we go to a back five, it will be easier for them to score. I think there was genuine consideration. It just was clearly the wrong idea. Was it too? Yeah, they were just out at sea, weren't they? I think Bednarek was just having one of those games where you just thought he's either going to get sent off, he's going to do something crazy, do something mad.
Should have been sent off for me.
Yeah, and I wasn't surprised to see him taken off at half time. And I actually texted a contact of mine after about 40 minutes of watching Bednarek, thinking this has got 9-0 written all over it with Bednarek on the pitch. We've seen this story before.
Yeah.
And then, as Glenn said, I couldn't work out whether Southampton improved or Liverpool got bored in the second half. We saw the same against Man United, where they could have scored as many as they wanted against United, but they just stopped. They almost felt sorry for them. And you kind of feel it was the same against Southampton. But yeah, I think 4-0 probably represents par for the course. They've beaten better sides than Southampton by that scoreline this year, and probably represents decent damage limitation as far as Southampton are concerned.
It was always going to be a difficult afternoon, Steve. Were you surprised with the changes in the starting lineup? We had Lianco coming in, Peru obviously starting, and Broja up front.
Yeah, I mean, I think the kind of defensive structure, I think, was kind of what I expected and kind of hoped for in a way, which probably explains why I'm not a football manager. But from the attacking sense, I thought he'd go with one central striker, and I mean, to be honest, you could pick any one of the three in that system, and whoever it is probably going to be a little bit isolated. They're going to have to run their arse off to get anything in the game. But then I thought he'd play probably Redmond. I mean, based on who came on as subs, play Redmond and Teller as the two wide players of that front three, because then that effectively gives you the 9 outfield players in defensive roles. Redmond and Teller are quite disciplined from a defensive perspective, and they would have given the wing backs a lot more protection. Whereas, I mean, Livramento was completely hung out to dry. Robertson got in behind him time and time again, and it was the number of overloads on that side was. I mean, you could tell that we'd done work on cutting off Alexander-Arnold with his crossing, because he didn't get the opportunity to put many of those balls into the box. But because we'd shifted ourselves so far to the left, it gave Robertson so much room down our right, and Livramento didn't have a good game, was torn to pieces. But if you give a kid no protection against one of the best left backs in the league, I mean, what are you expecting from the lad? It's and obviously he's got Bednarek alongside him, who has, as Dan said, had an absolute shocker.
Yeah, you've also got Sadio Mane over that side. He ain't bad either.
Yeah, Mane had a good first half. He was fairly quiet second half, I think, but it kind of didn't matter at that stage. But yeah, and Romeo and Ward-Prowse weren't able to really get on the ball because they were outnumbered. And I think if we'd had Redmond and whoever, whether it's Teller, Gineppo, or El Yunusi in that situation, then you automatically give yourself a little bit more protection. And I think that is probably the one kind of tactical aspect that I think Ralph absolutely got wrong. And I know he came out afterwards and said, "Oh, it's all on me. I picked the wrong system." I actually don't think the system was necessarily wrong. It was just he picked the wrong players in the attacking area of the game because it didn't give us enough strength.
Well, Ralph was clear in the press conference afterwards that he took full responsibility, I think, for that defeat, Dan. What else did he say about that? Do you think he was taking the blame off the players, or genuinely another mistake from Ralph there?
Well, he said it he kind of buried it in an answer to me, that he holds his hands up, and with Ralph, it's not often he kind of does that. Not that he blames the players, but seldom does he kind of put the blame on himself. So I specifically said, is that you taking full responsibility? Not one player is to blame, individual mistakes. This is on you. And he went, yep, completely hold my hands up. And he said, I could have played any system, but to be honest, they probably would have scored still. He was so effusive about their forwards. And at times in that first half, they are just on a different level. He used an F1 analogy, didn't he, in the week? And I think he described it to like a mid-ranking team going up against a Red Bull. It was more like watching a Haas try and keep up with Lewis Hamilton, if we're being honest. But yeah, he held his hands up, and I don't think there's much more he could have done. I think everyone could see it was his fault. It was his team. It was his system, and it didn't work. But in his defence, I don't think anything he could have done on Saturday would have stopped that forward.
They're so good. They're the best attacking side in the league by bar none.
Mm-hmm. They're a joy to watch as well.
They're the most dangerous, and it's not just they play at a ridiculous speed. But one thing I notice, you pick up if Van Dijk's got the ball, for example, and he switches it out to Salah. It's not okay. The ball might get to Salah, but it might not. And a couple of times, Perot got his head in there. But Alexander-Arnold has pushed up so far. He always picks up the second ball. So even if the ball doesn't get out to Salah, Alexander-Arnold picks up the ball and the attack continues. And then our players are trying to adjust, and they're flying past you all over the place. I think we needed another proper player in the centre of midfield. I know Diallo was missing, but it just seemed to me that the problem was, as Steve alluded to, Livramento was supposed to push up and make a midfield four with Ward-Prowse, Romeo, and Perot. But he ended up having to run backwards to cover Robertson the whole time.
Yeah.
And then we ended up with just two players in the centre of midfield, and it was just horrible. And they just, Thiago and Henderson. Henderson's not everyone's cup of tea, but he exactly knows his role in that team, what to do. They're so good when we attack, they pick the ball up. Henderson and Thiago, they know they're going to hit runners, they're going to go forward, they're going to pass it forward quickly. So that's their role, and they just mop everything up. And they are so good. And Liverpool as an attacking force can hurt you so many different ways. And if they keep their key players fit, they're going to be in the shake-up at the end of the season to win the big prizes without a doubt.
And you got the impression. Go on, Dan. Sorry.
No, I was going to say, I think we're talking a lot about the defence, but I think Steve made a really important point about the strikers as well. They did have chances, and you're kind of more concerned about the chances they're missing than the goals they're conceding against. Well, for me, I was more concerned about the chances that they wasted against Liverpool rather than the goals they conceded. They're always going to concede against Liverpool, but it's not often you get several chances and they wasted every single one. That for me is a lot more worrying than the defensive performance.
I think Ralph alluded to the fact that Diallo was going to perhaps come in. He said there was some things they worked on during the week with Diallo, and then he was out at the last minute, so they had to set up slightly differently. So perhaps they weren't as well prepared as they could have been, Glenn. But it was just a frustrating afternoon.
Yeah, in Ralph's defence, if he was going to pick his normal 4-2-2-2 formation, so Elyounoussi was out. If you look at our wide players, if Elyounoussi was out, Armstrong was out, they're probably the first two that get picked. Redmond's missed football because he's been off with COVID and his wife's had a baby, and you've had Gineppo has been injured as well. Walcott's totally out of form, and Teller isn't really trusted yet. So if he'd gone with 4-2-2-2 from the start, who would you have picked? He'd have probably got battered whoever he picked, bearing in mind, who was available. I mean, he probably would have had to start with Redmond and Walcott. Now, who's saying that would have been any better?
Not us.
I do feel that his hands were tied slightly certainly by Elyounoussi and Armstrong not being available. I mean, we could have revisited the Tino on the right wing and Walker Peters at right back thing, but we're obviously not going to do that. So I do have a certain amount of sympathy with the late withdrawals, but yeah, it was horrible, and I think he took too long to change it as well. Yeah. At 2-0, that was the time to change the formation, because it clearly wasn't working. And yeah, I mean, the game's probably dead at 2-0 anyway, but at 3-0 it certainly is.
Yeah, there are some positives though. I mean, let's talk about Lianco and Salazu, Steve. What did you make of potential partnership for those two at the back? That looked promising.
It's kind of difficult to gauge against a team that's running you ragged. I mean, I think the organisation second half certainly looked a lot better, but then again we come back to the context of Liverpool had massively taken their foot off the gas, and so therefore it was automatically a slightly easier kind of last 30 minutes or so. I mean, Salasu, we've kind of said consistently this season that he looks like the guy who is the guaranteed name on the team sheet in that defence, and it's a case of who plays alongside him, whether it's one of Lianco, Stevens, or Bednarek, or obviously if we go three at the back, then it's two from those three. I mean, Lianco's not. I mean, he was unlucky with the deflection for Thiago's shot. I mean, I suspect Thiago probably scores anyway, even if he doesn't get the deflection on it.
Yeah.
But I mean, there wasn't anything obvious that I can remember that he screwed up.
I was surprised that he was wearing gloves. I wasn't expecting that, if I'm honest. He didn't strike me as a gloves player, to be honest. But Ambrosia coming in, Glen, some positives there. I thought, he looked lively as we've come to expect from him, but just it wasn't maybe the right game.
It's difficult because he was picked to play a system. Now it looked to me, I mean, Dan will be able to tell me this because he was at the game. It looked to me like Brozier and Adam Armstrong were supposed to be the furthest forward, and Che Adams was trying to drop deep and get things going. But to be honest, none of those three players are suited to playing in wide areas. They just don't seem to like it, and none of them are suitable for dropping off like Diogo Jota does for Liverpool, for example. So yeah, I mean, that goes back to Steve's point. I don't think that the system was necessarily completely wrong. I mean, I wouldn't have played that, no way. But not having forwards that were comfortable going deeper towards their own goal or playing in wide areas, I just think it was a very, very difficult afternoon. I mean, I do like about Brozier, I do like the fact he's so direct. So when Alexander-Arnold did that throw in that didn't reach, it was just like, right, that's mine and I'm going. And I thought he did really well there, and was quite unfortunate because was it Kanate had a nibble at him and he could have gone down at that point. I think he was.
You're never getting that in front of the cop, though, are you?
No, I know, but yeah, it might have been worth a go. I mean, we were going to lose anyway.
I mean, Allison's the only keeper in that game that's made a save.
Yeah, McCarthy's had no chance. I mean, to be fair to him, he's had no chance on any of the goals. And I think
Van Dijk won, maybe.
Yeah, he made one
was quite close.
He made one save, did he, from Mane? The one he flipped into towards the top corner. But I don't think you can blame McCarthy too much for that. But
I should record that.
Maybe we will.
Maybe we will.
Maybe we will.
Say that again. Say that again and let me record it.
Maybe we will. Hey Dan, we've always got last week, mate.
Let's talk about the changes that Ralph made at halftime. Dan, switching back to the 4-4-2, if you like. Was that an admission that the game had gone then? Because you kind of go, well, we're not going to score 3 or 4 at Anfield, so this is part damage limitation and part an eye on the next couple of games. Do you think?
I think that's probably I learned my lesson at Old Trafford. I changed the system at halftime. Do what I need to do. Let's not be embarrassed here any more than we need to be. It it was just so evidently no one could watch that game and think Southampton the system was working. Had he not changed it, it would have just been quite remarkable. And I think a year ago, he definitely wouldn't have changed it. So I guess he's evolved over the past year. But yeah, I don't know what you can really say about he changed the system because it wasn't working and they were 3-0 down. As I said, I don't know whether they improved or Liverpool got bored. I imagine it's probably a little bit of both. But I lean a bit more towards Liverpool got bored.
Damage limitation in the second half, Steve? Is it a case of write it off and move on, do you think?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, there's given our relatively recent past, I'm sure there were a few sort of slightly twitchy minds in the dressing room at half time, thinking, "Oh God, how many is this going to be again?" But no, I mean, we stuck at it, and it wasn't like they missed a hatful of chances second half either. We managed to limit the number of openings we gave them. I mean, again, yeah. How much is that an improvement on our part? How much is them taking the foot off the gas? Who knows? I mean, basically depends on which opinion you have of whether you want to take the glass half full or the glass half empty approach. So yeah, toss a coin on that one, I think. But I mean, we improved. Should have scored one or two again second half. I mean, that double miss by Armstrong was just ridiculous. I'm not even sure the first shot that was blocked by the defender was even going in anyway. I think he scuffed it completely. Although it may actually have scuffed into the path of whoever it was that was running alongside him for a tap in, but it was because it was that bad.
If there was only one defender in the country and he was in another ground, Adam Armstrong would hit him. He just hits defenders with every single shot.
I mean, if we're talking about poor shots, we've all got to reference Mo Salah's shot. I mean, where he hit the corner flag. I mean, that doesn't happen very often. But I don't know if you would have seen that on Match of the Day or the highlights.
Yeah. Well, I saw it while watching the game. That was pretty impressive.
Let's talk about McCarthy then and that fourth goal. I know, Dan, you were asked about this yesterday on the website. I think we're all convinced that we're not going to see a change soon, and Ralph publicly backed him during the week. And you stand by that still, Dan, that we're not going to see Fraser Forster coming in anytime soon.
I just don't see the logic. I really don't. I think they decided to give McCarthy a new contract. He signed it. They decided at the time that they weren't going to go down the Fraser Forster route. So I don't know why now, unless it gets horrendously bad, I don't know why you change it. And I think I was actually quite surprised in the week when Ralph came out and defended McCarthy so strongly, because he doesn't normally do that, especially where the goalkeepers are concerned. But he made the kind of point that I'd been making. You can't, okay, the Norwich game was bad, but you can't just put that in isolation. You also have to think about the other saves he's made, which have, Watford, for example, makes that save, Southampton win the game. He's not the Premier League's best goalkeeper. He's never going to be the Premier League's best goalkeeper, but he's what Southampton have got. They chose him over Forster. So why would you go back to Forster? What message does that send to Alex? That, we've just given you a new 3-year deal. How's this for your confidence? You're going to be on the bench from now on until the summer when Forster disappears. As I say, unless it gets horrendously bad, I don't see why you would change it in the league. I think you've signed up to it, so just go with it. And over the course of the season so far, I don't think he's been horrendously bad. I really don't. I think he's made a lot of good saves. He's made a few errors as well. And I think the Van Dijk goal, it kind of did go through him a little bit. But yeah, I don't know. It feels like every week I'm kind of in the McCarthy fan club, which I'm not. But I just get bored of that argument. He makes a mistake. Oh, let's pick Forster then. It's got to be Forster, as if Forster's the solution to everyone's problem. And
looking forward to seeing the T-shirt next week.
It's just a tired debate. I mean, I don't know. I carry on with it because I just think it's such a short-term thing. Like last season, it was, what's Ralph doing changing the goalkeeper every week? Now it's like, well, we need to change the goalkeeper every week. It's kind of like, I just don't really buy into that debate. So, yeah.
And actually, Steve, Ralph said this week, he said, you don't want to get into a situation where you're chopping and changing your goalkeeper every week. And when I heard him say that, I was thinking, well, that's exactly what you were doing last year. So even he doesn't want to go back to that. So would you leave it as it is, Steve?
I think so. I mean, for a lot of the reasons that Dan said. I mean, the club has given him a new contract. Forster is out of contract in the summer, and by all accounts will be leaving. I don't think. I mean, I'd be absolutely amazed if there's any change in that situation between now and June. So yeah, I mean, it seems completely counterproductive to change that now. I mean, yeah, I mean, he's made a few mistakes in the last 8 or 9 days, but so have a lot of the outfield players. Problem is that goalkeepers' mistakes almost always cost goals. Strikers missing an open goal or missing a 1-on-1 or whatever, you might get another go during the game. It's not necessarily going to cost you that. So yeah, I mean, goalkeepers are held to a higher level, which is partly unfair, but also it's kind of part of the course, and every keeper understands the situation in that regard, I suppose.
Is that a clean sweep from you as well, Glenn? It feels like we've been debating this since August, and here we are, end of November,
March.
going into December, and we're still talking about it.
Yeah, I mean, Dan made an important point there. He's never going to be the best goalkeeper in the league, and we shouldn't expect him to be. If he was the best goalie in the league, he wouldn't be playing for Southampton. Let's face it. I mean, I think it's harsh to blame him for the fourth goal. The two at Norwich were a different story. But I think, and ultimately the fourth goal yesterday didn't matter a bit. So he may feel he should have stopped it, but yeah, I totally agree. I mean, if we do, for argument's sake, sign Sam Johnston in January, then it's another story, because it's two goalkeepers going forward who are going to have 3-year contracts, who are in a fair fight for the shirt. But they've decided for this season that Alex is the man. So let's just go with it. I mean, Forster will save some that Alex wouldn't save, and he'll make mistakes that Alex will make. There's really, really very, very little between them. So let's go with what we've got. And
but the debate will continue. That's one thing we know. That's for sure. Just final word on the game yesterday, I suppose, Steve. The defence has been much better this season. It's the goals that have been the problem. Was there anything alarming from the 4 that we conceded yesterday, or do we just put it down to Liverpool being sharp and fluent, and they did the same against Arsenal last week?
Yeah, I mean, I think an attack as fluid as theirs can just completely flummox you, and I think that was the situation we got ourselves into in spells in that first half, whereby, particularly the second goal, I think both Salazu and Perrault are caught the wrong side, and then Livramento's not tracking his man into the far post. I mean, he's a good 5-6 yards behind him. He's miles away. So nobody covers themselves in any glory on that goal, I don't think. But it's one of those where you don't know how bad your defence has been until you see that same attack up against other sides. And obviously they destroyed Arsenal last week. Same scoreline. Again, could have been many more if they could have been bothered. But again, they took their foot off the gas after they got the fourth goal, and were quite happy just to see the game out. So that's the level that you're dealing with. When even a side that's as relatively expensively assembled as Arsenal goes there, and when I know they've been a bit up and down over the recent years, but they're still a good Premier League side. And for them to still get their themselves sort of get their asses handed to them on a plate, basically, was kind of eye-opening a little bit.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, we're at a level where you're going to expect a hiding occasionally against the bigger sides, and it's a case of how you ride it out.
Dan, I think you wrote this week in The Athletic about the improvements at the back and the defensive improvements. Does that game yesterday change any of that, or do we just put it down as a one-off?
No, I've wanted to write about that for a while, actually, and I got to the beginning of the week, and I was like, well, look at these one of the fixtures coming up. I think we should kind of capitalise on the numbers while they look quite good at the back. Yeah, I personally would put it down to a one-off. I saw Leicester had a nice confidence-boosting win today where they scored a few goals, didn't they? Which is quite timely. But Southampton aren't going to come up an attack as good as that again until they play Liverpool at St Mary's next year. So that's what I would just not write it off, because I don't really like the idea of a free hit. But yeah, I think you just kind of put that under they're the best attack in the Premier League. Let's kind of move on.
Yeah. Glenn, we were looking pretty good before the international break. Now it's 2 defeats in a row, 15th in the table, 14 points. We're sort of looking over our shoulder a bit. A couple of new managers picking up some points too. Should we be a little bit worried going into these next 2 games?
No, because we haven't got any more international breaks. It's interesting. It's interesting because Ralph's used the international breaks in the past. Where we've been dreadful, and he's used the international breaks, and he's got his head sorted out, and we've come back and been a lot better. Now, before this international break, we'd won 3 and drawn 1. And it seems like he's taken this international break and made us worse, because suddenly we're experimenting with this 3 striker nonsense, and we had all 3 central midfielders playing against Norwich. So it's an interesting one that he's kind of fixed it and it wasn't broken. So I don't tend to look at the league tables much. Maybe, or certainly not until, I'm old school. I don't start looking at the league tables till about March, see if we're going to get relegated or not. But all will look well if we deal with these next 2 games that we got coming up. And if you win the game that's in front of you, then the league table looks after itself, doesn't it? And that's what happened when, I don't know where we were, 4th bottom or something, when we went on that little run when we, beat Leeds and whoever else it was we beat. Seems so long ago now, and suddenly we, a win against Norwich and we would have been 7th. So it can change very quickly. And we've got Leicester and Brighton coming up in home games. Yeah. If by some chance we win both of those, then we won't be remotely worried about the league table. But lose them both, and if you're that way inclined, you can start feeling quite depressed about things.
It was just the Norwich one, I thought. Really, I think the Norwich one is the only one that kind of makes anyone remotely concerned, I guess. If they win that, then as Glenn said, they were like top half of the table, and you go to Liverpool and no one cares if you lose. If you lose to Leicester, it's okay. Well, they're still a pretty good team. But obviously, the way the Premier League is and kind of social media, you feel like Ralph's being judged for his job every single week at the moment. So
yeah. Just before we move on to those 2 games, I wanted to mention James Ward-Prowse making his 200 Premier League start at Anfield yesterday. Just a word on the captain from each of us, because I know he's come under some criticism. But Glenn, you were sharing some stats about him last week, and actually, when you look at the evidence, he's back on form and he's delivering.
I think there's a tendency, because he's not someone who's going to rattle in 15 goals a season, and because of the kind of way he goes about the game, I think there's a tendency to sort of not appreciate quite how good he is sometimes. We had a player a few years ago called Matt Oakley, who I feel was kind of similar in that he was quite understated with the way he went about things, and people didn't really sort of like appreciate him until he wasn't there. You can have whatever.
He wasn't there a lot because he got injured a lot.
Yeah, he did towards the end. He got injured a lot, but and we got relegated pretty soon afterwards, interestingly. But he, whatever you think of Gareth Southgate as a manager, he obviously sees something in Ward-Prowse to have him as one of his sort of 4 or 5 central midfield players who he thinks are going to do the job for us in Qatar later on. So it's not just Ralph who rates him as a player. I think his fitness levels are remarkable, and I think if he wasn't there, we would struggle if he wasn't, if he was out for a longer period of time. So fair play to him. He won't remember his 200th game very fondly because he just spent it chasing around, watching these red blurs go past him. But no, good player, and I'm pleased we still got him.
All right. A couple of big games coming up. So Leicester is the one on Wednesday night. It's a 7:30 kickoff, by the way, because it's on Amazon. So make sure you get there for that one. What have you made to their start of the season, Steve? Obviously, nice little win for them today. Maybe Jamie Vardy finding his form. It's been interesting.
Yeah, my kind of hope for Wednesday is that James Ward-Prowse spends his entire sort of training ground preparation on set piece delivery.
Yes.
Because we had a number of corners at Anfield on yesterday where none of them beat the first man. If he can get the crosses into the right areas, we will score goals from set pieces against this team. They are an absolute train wreck at the back from set pieces. And it doesn't matter which combination of centre backs they're picking. They are conceding goals left, right, and centre from set pieces. Going forward, they're still a good outfit for the most part. Vardy's quality has been for a long time. Stop the supply line into him, and you can keep him quiet. So that's a job for the central midfielders. I see James Maddison is conveniently back in form, which is obviously annoying. So someone's going to have to keep up with him for the evening on Wednesday. But yeah, I mean, I think if we can cut off that supply line into the attackers, then we've got every chance, because at the back they are ropey.
I feel slightly responsible for Jamie Vardy finding his form, because I transferred him out of my FPL team this week, so that was always going to happen. They had a good win today. They had a good result in Europe as well. Dan, is it a winnable game?
Yeah, I think before that game they'd won 2 in 9, I think, in the league, wasn't it? So yeah, they're not kind of the Leicester I thought they would be this season. I mean, they did sign half of Southampton's defence, so perhaps that does explain why.
But neither of them are playing. Even the defence this bad, and they can't get in it.
I think they found out quite quickly.
Wasn't even in the squad, was he, for today? I don't think.
I mean, there's talk that because he had COVID right at the very start of the season and missed a couple of games. There's talk that he's had sort of long-lasting effects from that, which wouldn't surprise me. I mean, there's been a few players who have had issues with that over the last 18 months or so. So yeah, I mean, if that's the case, then that's unfortunate for him, because yeah, you would think that a fit Ryan Bertrand gets in that Leicester team. Vestergaard, not quite so sure, but
yeah, I know their fans haven't been overly happy. How do we set up for this one, Glenn? What are you expecting from the team?
Oh, I think we'll go back to after getting burned at Liverpool. Oh, excuse me. I think we'll go back to the 4-2-2-2 formation, and yeah, well, if the wide players are fit, if Elyounoussi is available and maybe Stuart Armstrong or whoever, I see us, reverting back to what we are in the main quite good at. I don't recall if we, of course, last year at home against them, Mr. Vestergaard got sent off after about 10 minutes, didn't he? And we had to change the formation and just see that one out. But so yeah, I mean, for me, Brendan Rodgers has had too many choices. They've filled up their squad this year for a Europa League campaign, and it looked like they were actually going to go out until they won earlier on in the week, and then they would have been left.
They went from bottom to top, didn't they? I mean, that
it was a strange group, very strange group. Yeah.
Then they'd have been left with lots of players on 3-year contracts and nothing to do with them. So I think Brendan's had too many choices, and I think maybe he's started to believe his own hype a little bit, and thought that he could put whatever he wanted out on the pitch. I mean, like last year, Iheanacho was the main man, wasn't he? And he was scoring all the goals at the end of the season. He's hardly played this year. He seems to be, very in and out of the side. Vardy has struggled the last sort of 3 or 4 weeks, but he was back against Watford scoring some goals.
Yeah. So Saint194 is watching the stream, says, I don't like the idea of playing Leicester at home under the lights in a storm. So all eyes on the weather forecast. For Wednesday.
It always seems to be a midweek game, doesn't it? Funny.
Yeah. So predictions. I think, Steve, you had 3-0 to Liverpool for the weekend. So I think you were probably the closest, actually. Do you want to go first for the Leicester game? Because am I right? You'll be back for this one.
Yes, I will be. Yeah, I get.
I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. But...
I get to stand in the freezing cold again. It's been a while. I like the matchup against their defence. I think that works in our favour. It's just a case of how badly the confidence has been hit after yesterday, and if they've got time to kind of get the system back into shape. But no, I'll go for a win. I think we'll 2-1. That'll do.
2-1. All right, Dan, how do you see this one playing out?
I think a 1-1 draw.
Okay. Glenn, anything other than a win or a draw?
Well, it only leaves me with a defeat, doesn't it? No, I quite fancy us to nick this one. So I'll go 1-0 and an incredibly nail-biting last 10 minutes while everyone streams out of the ground.
Well, stick with you, Glenn. What have you made? Obviously, Brighton on Saturday. Just a couple of minutes on them. What have you made to their season so far? It's been a bit up and down.
Yeah, they started very well, didn't they? And they appeared in the top, top 4 or 5 of the league for a little bit, and now it seems to be settling down a bit. Quite remarkable, considering that they are a team that could finish anywhere between 7th and bottom. It's quite remarkable that their fans seem to be getting above themselves a little bit and getting restless with the fact they drew 0-0 with whoever it was on
Leeds
on Saturday. Yeah, I mean that just seems a bit strange that fans get, or teams that don't usually get success get even a tiny bit of success, and then the fans seem to get right up themselves. I mean, it's interesting. Leicester, obviously, they had some proper success with winning the league and winning the cup, and their fans suddenly seem to get very entitled all of a sudden. And so I was a bit surprised to see what went on at Brighton in the game against Leeds. Graham Potter is proving to be a very good manager, and he's been spoken of as a manager who could do a good job with the England team when Gareth Southgate eventually decides to go. So they're a good side. They're a side that you feel that we should beat, but they've obviously got something about them. They do seem to be a bit more robust. They do seem to have a little bit more of a goal threat this season. Though it has tailed off a bit the last few weeks, but they'll be fine. They won't go down. And I personally, I think that's that's a step up from where they were last year.
Yeah, Dan, do you think it's got to be 4 points out of those 2 games really? Otherwise, pressure's back on Ralph.
If you look at social media, it's probably got to be 6 points from those 2 games. Otherwise, pressure's on
8,
Ralph.
isn't it? From 8 from 2.
8 from 2.
They're both tricky games, and they're not easy games. I don't want to say 4 points is the minimum. I don't know. I think a couple of draws wouldn't be the worst thing in the world. They're good teams. I think the Leicester game is actually probably more winnable than the Brighton game. Not really sure why I think that, but that's my thought process at the moment. I just think, yeah, as Steve said, defensively they're just out at sea, aren't they, at the moment? And one thing that Southampton haven't actually been that good at this season is set pieces. I don't know how many they've scored from, but they haven't scored from maybe 1, possibly, if from memory. Is it 1 they've scored from? Yeah, but not the usual standard you'd expect from Southampton, given they've got Ward-Prowse kind of whipping them in. But Brighton, I think, will be a difficult game. I think I like Graham Potter. I thought he went up in my estimation when he came out after that game quite quickly and sort of, shot down the fans that were booing and gave them a quick reminder of who they support and where they are.
Yeah.
So yeah, he went up in my estimation for that. 2 draws I think would be good, but although I predicted a draw against Leicester, I could see them beating Leicester, but possibly drawing against Brighton.
Okay, do you want to go first with the Brighton score prediction then? Are you going to go for a score draw?
I'll go for a draw, yeah, no. I think it will be a goalless draw.
Goalless draw. Steve, the Brighton game?
Yeah, I'm going with the same. Basically, Brighton have reverted back to what they were last season in that they were creating loads of really good chances and just not finishing any of them. I mean, if you saw Neil Mopey last night, I think he had 2 gilt-edge, almost open goals in the first half, and he didn't hit the target with either of them. So they're kind of reverting back to type after having a decent start. But we are also missing gilt-edge chances.
Yeah.
So unless one of the defenders decide, I mean, if Lewis Dunk decides he wants to stick one in his own top corner, then absolutely be my guest. But otherwise, 0-0.
0-0. Glenn, do you think it's going to be another dour afternoon at St Mary's?
Yep. I'll go. I'll be slightly more optimistic, but only slightly, and I'll go for a 1-1 draw.
A 1-1 draw, right? Okay. Well, whatever happens, we'll be back to discuss the results of those games next week. That's about it for episode 177. So, my thanks, as always, to Steve, to Glenn, and to Dan. Thank you for your time. Thanks also to our Matt Letizia tier patrons. That's Colt Baker, Dave Ernsberger, Ed Busy, and Phil Cook, and also Nick Reed, who's in our Francis Benali tier. To find out more about becoming a TSP patron and the benefits that come with that, do check out the website this week. And also, we dropped a bonus edition of the pod. It was the interview that we did with the Saints managing director, Toby Steele. That's still available to enjoy on all the usual channels if you haven't listened to that yet. You can find out and listen again to all the recent episodes of the TSP on our YouTube channel. So do hit subscribe if you're watching us on there. Don't forget to follow this podcast wherever you're listening. That would be lovely. And as always, if you do want to get in touch on the socials, we are at Total Saints Pods, and you'll find us on Twitter and on Facebook, and you can email the guys via the website at any time. Thanks for listening, thanks for watching, and have a good week.